The sports card market sure is frothy right now. Record prices continue to be set every week, it seems. And the latest data from our market movers SCI 500 index of 500 of the most prominent sports cards shows that those cards are collectively up over 30% year to date. If you invested right going into this year, if you bought and held desirable cards of all-time greats, chances are you've done very well this year. Now, if you bought a bunch of Cam Ward and JJ McCarthy, then I can't help you. But overall, it has been a great year for sports cards. But what happens if the market turns south? Because inevitably, someday in the future, we'll hit a point where the market will begin to fall. And when that happens, how should you invest then? How can you profit from a declining sports card market? Well, I'll tell you how next. The Geoff Wilson Show is brought to you by Arena Club, the official home of slab packs. Now available every day, slab packs offer an exciting way to collect graded cards with confidence. Plus, every pack comes with an instant offer to buy your slab. Don't miss out. Explore the latest slab packs and more by downloading the Arena Club app. Just search Arena Club in your app store and use promo code SCI20 for 20% off your first purchase. All right, so if you're going to invest wisely and profit from a declining sports card market, the first thing you need to do is actually recognize that the market is declining. You have to see the market flip occurring to know what is happening. And there's a few ways, there's going to be a few telltale signs when we hit that market slide in the future that you should constantly be watching out for, just to ensure that all of your sports card investments, your sports card portfolio are as well protected as possible. So first of all, you're obviously going to see the price of cards dropping. But the cards that I would look at the most are the iconic cards. From back in time, from your 1933 Gaudy Babe Ruth to your 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle, fast forwarding to your 1984 star Michael Jordan and your 1986 Fleer Michael Jordan, fast forwarding to your 2003, Topps Chrome LeBron James, Michael Jordan, or other cards of that ilk. And of course, you can look across all sports. You can look across baseball and basketball and football and even maybe take a peek at hockey and soccer and alternative sports as well. Looking at iconic cards, you want to see a pattern emerge across several of these cards where the last sale was less than the sale before. You're always going to have some variation on a card-by-card basis. So the fact that like one or two of these cards sold for less than the sale prior, don't get too freaked out about that. As an example there, the 1984 star Michael Jordan card, that card had gone up quite a bit for some time, got kind of a little overheated, then had, and I'm talking about in PSA condition, that card had jumped up and jumped up. This would have been in like 2003, 2004. Then it had a little bit of a lower sale indicating, okay, maybe this thing is starting to come down again. And then it started to go back up again. And now it's at an all-time record high price. So one single low sale or a couple of low sales, especially on one particular card, don't necessarily indicate anything. Of course, when you have vintage in play, eye appeal also can make a big difference for what a card sells for. So just because a PSA 7 Mickey Mantle 1952 Topps or 1951 Bowman sold for less than the sale before it, that by itself doesn't necessarily mean anything because it could have been an eye appeal issue, or it could have just been that the sale right before went for a really high price because two bidders were just dueling it out and it kind of went for a crazy price, and then the next sale settles back down to earth a little bit. So a single sale or two, not cause for alarm. But if you start seeing a pattern, if you start noticing that a lot of different iconic cards from different eras, from vintage to modern to ultra modern, from Patrick Mahomes and Tom Brady on back to Joe Namath and, players of that era. In football, for example, if you're seeing kind of a widespread, fallback, if your 1984 tops, John Elway and Dan Marino, and your Peyton Manning cards from 1998, some of his key rookies, if your, Brady Bowman rookie is falling backwards, if your Mahomes, Prism Silver rookie from 2017 is falling backwards, and all of these are falling backwards in unison, now you might have a little bit of a greater issue at hand, and it might be a sign of market pullback. So I would track the key cards across different eras and across different sports. Obviously, within market movers, we have our SCI 500 index of iconic sports cards, and we intentionally make that index so that it goes across all the different sports and all the different eras, so it gives you an overall sense of the market. So if you just want to cheat and just make this process easier for yourself, just look at market indexes like the SCI 500 index and market movers, because that will combine all of these cards to give you a sense. And by the way, whether you're looking at individual cards and tracking the price of those, or whether you're looking at an index, make sure you're looking at cards that, while iconic, are in grades that transact relatively often. You don't want to be looking at your 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle in PSA 9 condition, because one of those only publicly transacts once every, 5 years or something like that. You see those transact very rarely. You certainly don't want to look at the 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle in PSA 10 condition, because none of those, there's only 3 of those, and none of those have transacted for a few decades now. So if you're going to look at the 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle, you want to go down a few grades. Maybe you're looking at that card, for example, in PSA 6 condition. It's still a very nice high-end 6-figure card, but in PSA 6, because the population's larger, you see it sell more often. Maybe you look in PSA 5 condition. You're going to see that sell more often, so that's going to give you a more realistic look in a shorter time period of what the market's doing. And of course, our SCI 500 index combines a bunch of those cards in those mid-tier grades for vintage in particular, because we want to see them transacting often for the index. For modern and ultra modern, you're almost always looking at high grade like PSA 10. But for vintage, you got to look at the middle grades often in order to get a better sense of the market. So prices dropping is obviously, maybe warning sign number one that something is beginning to happen. But there may be leading indicators even before you actually see prices dropping. For example, you might see volume starting to drop across the major marketplaces. This year, we have seen record sales volume on eBay. eBay has reported out multiple times this year that they've had all-time high months for sales volume. Now, the last time they set an all-time high record was in the month of August. Sales did slide backwards in September and in October compared to August. That's not a warning sign in and of itself, because historically, seasonality of cards would tell you that September and October are typically a little slower, where August is actually a really good month for cards. August, you're coming right off the National. Typically, July and August are really good months for cards, because you've got the National, you've got summer. People are paying, for whatever reason, those months, people are paying a lot of attention to cards. You've got the lead up to the NFL season, which is a big moment for cards, where people speculating on NFL players before the season starts. So July and August, year after year after year, are big months for cards. September, October, things start to cool back a little bit. Then they tend to pick back up again in December, and especially as you get into the following year, January, February tend to be very good years for cards. So just things coming back 1 month or 2 months may be more of a sign of seasonality. But if it's unusual, if you're seeing a slide back, for multiple months in a row, or particularly if you're looking at year over year numbers, and this, let's say this November or this December or next January are less in terms of total marketplace sales volume on eBay or Fanatics Collect or Golden or other online marketplaces than the same month the year prior, that is going to be a warning sign that maybe things are slowing down a little bit, because now we're seeing year over year decreases. And if you see volume dip, then prices are probably going to dip too, because volume dipping is an indicator of demand dipping potentially. And if demand dips, then chances are cards are going to start selling for lower prices. So keep an eye on marketplace volume. Another data indicator to keep an eye on are grading submissions. Right now, we're seeing record grading submissions month over month overall, and in particular with PSA setting all-time high grading submission numbers. If that begins to slow, especially if it's not just 1 month or a little bit of a seasonal dip, but if you're seeing grading slide backwards multiple months in a row, that might be a sign that the market is cooling. So these are all things you could look for. But step one to know if the market's cooling and to take advantage of the market cooling is to identify that the market is cooling. So certainly keep an eye on those things. One other factor that's a little more anecdotal, but when people start bragging about, when they stop bragging about their card flips on social media and YouTube, that might be the moment that the market is cooling. You're seeing a lot of people right now on social media and YouTube brag, occasionally myself included, about making money on a particular card. I bought it for this and I sold it for this, and this is now 2 or 3 times as much. Or I bought it for this and the card today is worth this, which is 2 or 3 or 5 times as much, right? There's a lot of those posts on social media right now. If you see a lot less of those posts, all of a sudden, maybe the market is starting to cool down. And when the market starts to cool down, it may last for a while. We saw this happen not too long ago. We have a good example to reference back to for all of the lessons, all of the points that I'm going to make today, because this happened back in 2021. So as you guys know, 2019 was a hot year for sports cards, and that was even pre-pandemic. The sports card market really started growing, especially in late 2019. Those who have been in the market for a long time would tell you it grew some in 2017, it grew some in 2018, it grew more in 2019. So there had been growth going on for a while, but late 2019 is when we really started to see aggressive month-over-month growth, like really noticeable, aggressive month-over-month growth. That started to happen in late 2019 and in early 2020. Then the pandemic hits. And actually, once the pandemic hits, for a few weeks, everything slowed down and prices fell backwards. We did have a mini decline in the market when the pandemic hit, but that only lasted for a few weeks. And then once we got into April of 2020, so now the pandemic's been going on for a few weeks, all of a sudden, prices start to go back up. And wow, did they go back up. You had the Last Dance documentary released in early April of 2020. That helped fuel interest and nostalgia in cards. People were trapped in their homes. They realized all of a sudden it was going to be a while. They needed a hobby. They got their old cards out. They started transacting cards on eBay. It was a good hobby to do from home. They started watching content, much like our sports card investor content during that period of time. And everything went crazy. The market went crazy. Cards shot up like a rocket throughout all of 2020 into early 2021. And then it was around February of 2021 when the market peaked, when it hit its absolute peak, and then it started to drop back. And why did it start to drop back after February of 2021? I think for a couple of reasons. First of all, it was so heated for many, many months in a row that it just simply couldn't sustain it. You reached this point in time when flippers were selling to flippers. Once flippers are selling to flippers and there's no collectors in the mix buying anymore, that's when you got a problem. Because flippers selling to flippers, that's not a sustainable place for those cards to go. Today, you've still got a lot of collectors buying. I'm much less worried about the market today for a number of reasons. I'm much less worried about the market today than I should have been. And I was a little bit, but I should have been more worried about the market in early 2021. But today, I actually think you've still got a lot of collectors that are buying cards at these really good big prices. It's not just flippers selling to flippers, which is a lot what was happening in early 2021. So that was a warning sign for sure. Then the other thing that happened is the world started to open back up. The stimulus checks were gone. People started to have other things to spend their money on. The world started to open back up in 2021. People finally felt safe. You had the vaccine come into play. People finally felt safe to start to go back out again. And that means their money and attention quickly moved away from sports cards, and that means there was suddenly less demand and transaction volume slowed down and prices started to fall. And they fell for quite a while. Prices slid back for the last 9 or 10 months of 2021. They slid back for the entire year of 2022 as a whole, as an aggregate. And they slid back for part of 2023 as well. They finally started to stabilize as you got later in 2023 and then started to tick back up again. We had some upwards price movement in 2024, and then this year in 2025 has been a great year. But we had over 2 years of price drop before we got to stabilization and rise again. So if you're seeing those signs that the market is starting to cool again, it could last for a while. So be patient and buckle up, because the last time it happened, it lasted for a little over 2 years of slide backwards before things started to tick back up. By the way, when is that going to happen again? When do I think the market is going to fall again, like it started to fall in 2021? I don't know. Nobody can answer that with certainty. I can't tell you. What I will tell you is I started this show by saying the S&P 500 index is up over 30% this year. It can't keep going up 30% every single year. That will slow down. I would be surprised. I don't think the next 2 years that it can continue to go up at the pace that it went up this year. It's got to slow down. That doesn't mean that it will start to go backwards. It doesn't necessarily have to go backwards. It could just cool off some. But I do think it's probably going to cool off a little bit. That doesn't mean that it's going to crash and that it's going to be, all the things in this video are going to necessarily be relevant. But it could be sooner rather than later that we see a cool off, maybe a slide backwards, maybe not. I don't know. I'm a little more concerned right now about Pokemon than I am sports cards, because Pokemon got even more overheated this year than sports cards did. And with Pokemon, some of the cards that have gone berserk are very high population. I think the price increase in sports cards this year has made more sense, because the cards that went up a lot this year were not the speculative cards. They were not the rookie quarterbacks. The cards that went up a lot this year were the cards that should go up a lot. It was the iconic cards. It was the rare cards. It was the very desirable cards of the all-time greats. Those were the cards that really went up the most this year. Those are the cards that should go up. There were a lot of collectors buying those cards. So that gives me more confidence in where we are today. I don't think we're, back in a 2021 point where all of a sudden everything's going to start to go, backwards heavy right now. But I don't think things can continue to grow at the same pace that they are growing. Now, I will give you one X factor, and the X factor is Fanatics getting the NBA license, which they just got in October, just last month, and getting the NFL license next April. Fanatics is going to inject a ton of marketing into growing sports cards and trying to attract the everyday NBA and NFL fan to get into cards who aren't in cards right now. Fanatics is going to do the same thing in Europe with soccer. They're already underway with that. And if they are successful, which they were very successful with baseball the last few years, Fanatics tops under Fanatics leadership grew tremendously, mainly on the back of baseball cards over the last few years. Now they got the NBA license. Soon they'll have the NFL license. I think Topps will see a lot of growth in those areas. And if they're successful, which I think they will be, in getting a lot of those general collectors into the market, then that will help offset any type of market decline. That will help keep the market stable and growing, because you're going to have new demand being added to the market. Hopefully a lot of new demand if they're successful. So Fanatics is a big X factor. Of course, the other X factor in the opposite direction is just the health of the economy. None of us know what the greater economy is going to do. There are people who are predicting a recession looming, who are predicting, the economy taking a step backwards. Then again, that same prediction I have heard repeatedly now for like the last 3 or 4 years. And yet we're seeing like big time stock market numbers and all this stuff over the last year, right? So I don't know about that. Like people are always going to predict doom and gloom with the economy. Will it happen at some point? Sure. Someday they'll be right. Because yes, someday there will be another recession because that's how markets work. But, is that next year? Is that a few years out? I don't know. But the economy is the X factor, of course. So you got a couple of big X factors at play between Fanatics and the economy. Who knows how all this will turn out? Who knows if next year will be a big growth year for sports cards, a neutral year for sports cards, or whether sports card prices will fall backwards next year. I can't tell you I know. Nobody can tell you they really know. But what I am going to do right now is I'm going to get you prepared if that happens, when that happens, because it will happen at some point in time. So here we go. Let's get you prepared. You've seen the signs. You know what's happening. Now, what do you do? Okay, so first of all, number one, do not panic. The downturn in cards, when it comes, is an opportunity. It is not a reason to panic, just like any other form of investing. What the down market will do in the sports card world, just like it did in 2021, is it will get rid of the speculators. It will get rid of the flippers, and long-term collectors will get leverage. There will be deals for collectors. There will be opportunities for long-term investors as the flippers exit the market and people panic sell. That happened a lot in 2021 and 2022 and even a little bit in 2023. Cash is a weapon when others are scared. If you have cash, you have opportunity. So it is never a bad idea to set, cash aside just in general, right? For any type of investing and for your own personal security and safety, staying liquid, having some cash is always a good idea. But when the market turns down in sports cards, there's going to be the opportunity to buy some stuff really cheap. So having some cash, always a great idea. You have to be patient. The market takes a long time to adjust. When you start to see the signs of the market going down, that is not the right time to buy, because the market could continue to go down and down and down for months and years. As I said a minute ago, the last time the market went down on sports cards started in early 2021 and lasted all the way through to mid to late 2023, over 2 years. The next time the market goes down, it may not last quite that long, but it's going to last a little while. It's not going to be like, oh, it dropped for 2 months and now it's rallying back. Probably not. So you can be very, very patient. Not only be very patient with your buying, but then when you buy, be very, very patient with those cards maturing in value. It's easy to get frustrated. It's easy to buy a card at what you think is the low point and then watch it continue to go down for the next year. That happened with some of my investments during the last low point. Thankfully, with a lot of them, I was patient. Not all of them. I wish I was more patient. I bought heavily in 2021, 22, and 23 as the market was dipping. And I also bought heavily in 2019 and 2020 when the market was rising. In fact, I have bought heavily every single year for the last 5 years. And what the market was doing was not really having a huge effect on my buying patterns because I believed in the long term of the sports card market. So I continued to buy. Some of my purchases in late 2020 and early 2021, I way overpaid. And I took losses on some of those things, massive losses on some of those things that I sold. Some of my purchases in 2022 and 2023 have been absolute home runs for me. And I have made a boatload of money if you look at the current value of some of those cards that I was buying in 2022 and 2023 compared to where those cards are today. Some of my biggest wins, for example, in 2022, 2022 is when I bought the 2008 Topps Chrome Gold Refractor of LeBron James and Kobe Bryant, 2 different cards. I love 2008 Topps Chrome. That's the iconic the iconic imagery on those cards. They're the horizontal cards in particular of LeBron and Kobe. The LeBron card is very special because he's doing the chalk toss. The Kobe card is very special because he's guarding LeBron. So LeBron and Kobe are on the same card. I bought the gold refractors numbered to 50. I bought both of those in PSA 10 condition. In both cases, I paid between, I think, 45,000 and 55,000. I paid in that range for both of those cards. Today, I think it was the Kobe that recently sold for around 160,000. And I think people estimate the LeBron's worth around the same. So both of those cards are up over $100,000 a piece from where I bought them, probably about close to a 3x return, like a 2.5x return on both of those cards over the course of the last few years. Big wins for me. Now, I own both of those cards. I haven't sold them yet. And there's probably some people in the comments screaming like, well, you haven't made any money on them if you haven't sold them. That's true. I'm basing it off of recent sales of the same card in the same condition that other people sold their copies, right? So, I mean, you can reasonably infer then what my cards are likely worth if the same card in the same, condition recently sold on the market. So they're definitely up a lot. I also bought during that dip, I bought the 2002 Finest LeBron James Gold Refractor XRC. I bought it in a BGS 9. I crossed it to a PSA 8.5. I don't know exactly what that one's worth today. That one's numbered at 25. It's LeBron James' first licensed card ever, first NBA card ever, numbered at 25. I don't know exactly what it's worth. They sell very, very rarely. I would wager to guess it's worth at least double what I paid for it a few years ago. And I paid $80-something thousand for that card, I believe. The 1998 Molten Metal Kobe Bryant Fusion Titanium card, jersey numbered to 24, or it's card number 24, or at least one of his jerseys that he wore, one of his two jerseys over the years. That card has probably tripled since I bought it. I bought that in 2022. And then, of course, the 1984 Star Jordan. I bought that card in 2022 originally paid $100,000 for that card. I've owned a couple different copies of that card over the years. That's now a massive card. I can tell you I've turned down offers on that card for over $350,000. And I bought it for $100,000 back in 2022. So that one's up a boatload. So anyway, these are just a few examples, but there's a lot of cards from 2022 when I was continuing to buy cards that have gone up a ton. There are also cards from 2022 that I bought that I wasn't nearly patient enough on, and I eventually sold, in a few cases at a loss, that now if I still had them would be worth like 3 or 4 times what I paid for them. For example, at one point, I had a 2009 National Treasure Steph Curry that I bought out of 25, rookie patch auto card. I actually did okay on that card. I bought that card, or I traded into that card for a value of, I think, somewhere around $120,000, then traded out of it a few months later for a value of around $140,000. I thought I was doing great with a $20,000 short-term flip, except that same exact card today is worth, I don't know, $400,000 or something like that. Like I got, that was a disaster for me that I wasn't more patient with that card. I had a 52 Mantle, which I actually ended up taking a little bit of a loss on during that same time period. I traded into it and then I sold it, and it sold for less than I traded into it. There were some other Steph Curry cards that I actually took a little bit of a loss on during that time period. So I was not patient enough with some of these cards that I was buying during that time period. Patience is critical. Both from a buying perspective, be very patient before you buy, and from a selling perspective, once you buy, be willing to hold on to it for a long time to actually give yourself enough time to see the gains that those cards can bring. And I wish I was a little more patient. So patience, first and foremost, both in buying and selling. When you actually go to buy the cards, buy quality. Buy quality. Look for blue chips. Iconic over hype. Proven over prospect. Buy the GOATs. And not only buy the GOATs, but buy their really good cards that are low population and that you don't normally see come up for auction very often. Just as an example, the 1986 Fleer Michael Jordan card in PSA 10. Iconic card, one of the all-time great cards, one of the most important sports cards of all time. But in PSA 10, not super rare, a population of over 320 of that card. That card bottomed out in 2022, 2023. The bottom price of that card, it got down. There were some sales in the $150,000 range. That was the bottom that card ever hit. Well, today, that card is worth, I think, a little north of $200,000, maybe $250,000. It's up, but it's not nearly as up as some other Jordan cards that were a lot lower population yet are still iconic and sought after, such as his, we talked about the Star Jordan cards from 1984. Also, like his late 1990s inserts, the very popular Jordan inserts from the late 1990s, like Star Rubies and Precious Metal Gems, or, the molten metal, fusion titaniums that I talked about. Even things like his Dunk and Go Nuts card from the late 1990s. That card, I think, is up like 3 or 4x during, over the course of the last few years. Whereas the 1986 Fleer Jordan has not doubled. It's up, but it hasn't yet even doubled from where it was during its low point, because there's a lot more of that card out there. It's a higher population. So look for iconic, look for GOAT, but also look for rare, iconic, and GOAT. And they may pop up more often during a market downturn. I realize now how exceptional it was that in 2022, we were seeing a lot of really exceptional cards hit the market that we hardly see at all right now. There was at one point in time when I owned 2 2009 Topps Chrome Steph Curry Gold Refractors numbered to 50. I owned 2 of the 50 because there were several of them that became available in like 2022. I owned 2 of them. Now I think we've seen like 1, maybe 2 of that card hit the market, hit auction in the last year. It hardly ever comes up now for sale compared to how frequently it was coming up for sale a few years ago when people were feeling the need to dump it and get out of it. And that could have been happening because people were over leveraged or because they were just scared of what the market was doing. They were seeing the market fall and they're like, man, I got to get out of this card, or I want to get out of cards altogether. Or maybe they had bought it a long time ago and had made a big profit, but then they started to see the market fall back and they just wanted to sell to take their profit before it went too far back. For whatever reason, there were a lot of iconic cards like that one, which are very rare, which were hitting the market with more frequency back in 2021, 2022 that are not today. So if we see another dip, you might see some of these more rare iconic cards coming up more frequently then, because people are starting to panic sell for whatever reason. So that can prevent some opportunity to scoop up some of these super rare cards that I'm talking about that you just don't see very often. And those are the ones that will probably go up the most during the next boom down the road. It's not a bad idea to sell. If you're starting to see things go down, it's not a bad idea to sell a lot of your cards that would not be impossible ones to replace. Sell anything that you could buy back with relative ease in the future if you wanted to, and maybe at a lower price point. So if you're going to sell stuff when you see the market start to dip, sell the stuff that's easier for you to replace and sell it quickly. Because as we saw from the last slide, prices continue to slide back for a very long time. One of the bigger regrets that I have was not selling more quickly. I sold cards during the dip of 2021, 2022, 2023. I wish I had sold more cards more quickly. When I started to see things start to slide back in 2021, I wish I had just sold more. Instead of like selling a little and then continuing to see what the market was going to do and then selling a little more and selling a little more and selling more in 2022. I wish I just sold a lot quickly and taken my cash and then sat on the cash for a little while, waited until the market really had gone down and started to plateau, which I also would have determined by looking at market movers and seeing what all those price charts were doing. And when I started to see a plateau, then I would have taken that cash and I would have bought a lot of things. I wish I had done more of that. So if you're going to sell quickly and sell anything that you can't buy back at a later time, that you feel like it wouldn't be that hard for you to find those cards again. I think, so it's important to watch the market and to try to determine when it is in fact bottoming out. Because if you're going to be buying during the dip, if you're going to be buying during a downturn, you need to be looking for the bottom. Of course, you're never going to fully know when the bottom hits, but I think you could look historically at where cards have been to potentially give yourself some indication of where the bottom likely is if we run into this situation again in the future. So I'll give you an example. In early 2023, in January 2023, I put a video out on the Sports Card Investor YouTube channel where I said the title of the video was "The floor is close. The crash is ending soon." You can go look the video up if you want to go watch it. And I said, I thought this was early 2023. And I said, I don't think we're at the bottom of the market quite yet, but I think we're very close to the bottom of the market. And I think the market will bottom out and flatten out and start to go back up during the year 2023. Guess what? That happened. That's exactly what happened. It took several months after I released that video before it fully flattened and started to go back up, but it was pretty closely timed. If you go watch that video, you'll see what my theory was. And my theory as to why we were getting close to the bottom of the market was because I was looking at the price charts and I was seeing that those iconic cards that I was tracking, things like the 86 Fleer Michael Jordan and the 2003 LeBron James and Tom Brady rookies, and I think I had the Ken Griffey Jr. 1989 Upper Deck was one I was looking at in that video. I was looking at Tiger Woods 2001 SP card in that video. I was looking at examples across all sports. Wayne Gretzky's 1979 O-Pee-Chee. And I was comparing the price where those were at the beginning of 2023 to the price that those were prior to the pandemic starting. I was comparing those prices at the beginning of 2023 to, I believe I was looking like March 1st of 2020, right before the pandemic. And some of those cards had already hit. They were already down to March 1st, 2020 prices. Some of those cards were slightly below March 1st, 2020 prices. Many of those cards were still a little above March 1st, 2020 prices, but not a lot above. And I said, there's no way that these iconic cards that are so important and so sought after for sports card collectors, there's no way these cards are going to go much below the prices that they were before the pandemic started. And my reason for saying that was because there were so many new collectors that came into the market during the pandemic that the overall collector base was stronger than pre-pandemic. And even though some of those collectors that came in during the pandemic had left by 2023, they were just there during the pandemic and they were no longer in part of it. I said that the overall sports card market still had more collectors and was just a wider swath of people interested in sports cards overall in early 2023 than there was in early 2020. So I said, because of that, there's more people now. There's more people wanting to buy good cards. So there's no way that these really iconic cards should drop below the prices from early 2020. It just didn't make sense to me. And that's why I said we've got to be getting close to the floor, because these cards are close to that, early 2020 price point as an aggregate. And that was actually true. The prices went down a little further after my video, but not a whole lot. Then they plateaued, then they started to go back up. And that was, in fact, around the floor. So if we start to hit this situation again in a year or 2 or 3 or 5, where prices start to slide backwards, I would say anchor a point in your mind where you think prices probably can't go lower than. So that anchor may not be the prices today, because maybe today things are a little hot and a little overheated, but it might be 2024 prices. If cards start to slide backwards in 2026 or 2027, I would be surprised if they go below where they were, let's say, on January 1st of 2024. Because 2024 was another year, as is 2025, when a lot more people got into the sports card industry. There's way more collectors today than there were 2 years ago. And even if some of those collectors leave when prices start to fall, I still think the base of remaining collectors in 2026 or 2027 or 2028 will probably be greater than it was at the beginning of 2024. So I might use that as an anchor point and say, okay, I don't think, this rare Kobe Bryant card or this rare Mickey Mantle card or, this rare Tom Brady card, I don't think those cards can fall below where they were at the beginning of 2024. So maybe that's my sign that when the prices approach that's when I'm like, okay, I think things are probably getting near the bottom. And of course, the other thing you can do is just watch the charts and graphs in market movers. You're going to see when things are going down, you're going to see them falling down. Then you're likely going to see prices plateau for a while before they start to go back up. So if the charts were going down on a lot of these iconic cards, and then they start to get real flat, and then they start to tick back up, maybe that's your moment. If you look at the SEI 500 index of the 500 most prominent sports cards, you'll see this pattern play out very clearly. The SEI 500 index dropped a lot the second half of 2021, all through 2022, and through the first part of 2023. Then it started to plateau. 2024, it started to slightly go back up. 2024 as a whole was up, I think, a little bit, relatively flat, but moving up a little bit. And then 2025, it shot up out of a cannon. But you could clearly see a plateau. The plateau in the data was late 23 and a lot of 2024. That was your plateau point. So if you're just watching those charts, you could see that was, that there was a plateauing taking place there for sure. And you could probably feel pretty confident buying. And keep in mind, I'm generalizing the sports card market, but different parts of the market move a little differently. The high end sometimes moves different than the low end. Vintage sometimes moves different than modern and ultra modern. So it's not all in unison, but I'm just giving you some generalized examples now in terms of how to approach it. And then when you do buy, when you are putting money in, buy for the long term. The buy that you should be making are buys that you feel confident are going to be worth more in 10 years. Because when you buy the card, the market could still drop for another year or 2. You might think you're at the bottom. You might not be at the bottom. If you're trying to buy things to flip in a year, that's a real difficult thing to do in a declining market because you don't know when that bottom is going to be in. I would not, if the market is declining, I would not buy for short-term flip. I would buy for a long-term investment hold. That's what to buy when the market's declining. Buy cards where you're like, I'm confident that in 10 years, this card's going to be a great card to own and is going to be worth more. I don't know where that card's going to be in a year or 2 or 3, but I don't care because 10 years from now, I feel really good. And by the way, if you go back and look at my sports card investor videos from 2022, when I was talking about a lot of these cards that I was buying, and 2023, I kept saying to the audience in those videos, I don't know if these cards are going to be worth more or less in a year. It's entirely possible that all of these cards that I'm buying will be worth less in a year because the market will continue to go down. But I am confident that all of these cards that I'm buying will be worth more, a lot more in 10 years because I believe in these long term. And one little market cycle is not going to affect the long-term outlook of these cards being good investments, in my opinion. I repeated that mantra in 2022, in 2023, and that mantra has really paid off for me because even if some of the stuff I bought in 2022 continue to go down a little bit in 2023, guess what? In 2025, today, it's worth a lot more than I paid for it back in 2022. And I believe in 2030, it's going to be worth even more than what I paid for it in 2022. So next time we get into a downturn, take your cash, be patient, buy the goats, buy the great stuff, and buy stuff that you're confident is going to be worth a lot more in 10 years. And then don't worry about what the next year or two after that brings. And by the way, a couple of famous quotes, a couple of known quotes that apply to this situation really well. First of all, what's that Warren Buffett quote? When others are greedy, to be fearful, and when others are fearful, to be greedy. That is so true in sports cards. Those who bought cards in 2020 and 2021, and then when prices dropped, they got out of their cards and they stopped buying in 2022 and 2023 and 2024. And now that prices have roared back in 2025, now they're buying again. Those people got killed multiple times. They didn't just get killed once by buying at the peak in 2020 and 2021 and then selling for a loss. They got killed that time, and then they got killed by not buying in 2022 and 2023 when things are at an all-time low, and then them, all going back up now, right? Like, once again, when people are greedy, be careful, which is why I'm saying, be a little careful right now. There's a lot of greedy people out there, but when people are fearful, there's great opportunity. There certainly was great opportunity in the sports card market for those who were continuing to buy in 2022 and 2023. Every market has a winner. Those who build in winter dominate the next spring. Nothing could be more true. Next time there's a downturn in the sports card market, think of that. Money is made in the downturn. You just realize it later. And that's it. That's what you need to know. Next time there's a market downturn, that's what you need to know. Hopefully there will not be one soon. Knock on wood, guys. Knock on wood. I'm not calling for a downturn. I don't want there to be a downturn, but inevitably there will be someday. And hopefully this gave you some thoughts to help you get a little bit better prepared. What do you think? What suggestions do you have? When do you think the downturn might occur? Let me know your thoughts in the YouTube comments if you're watching on YouTube. And don't forget, these full-length episodes of The Geoff Wilson Show, they're available on YouTube on The Geoff Wilson Show channel. They're also available on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts, so make sure you are subscribed to The Geoff Wilson Show everywhere. Thank you for watching. I'll see you soon in their next episode. Take care.